We light our chalice this morning with the words of my friend Melanie Davis. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice.
Something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. Think it's time to stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look, we're going down. Battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds, getting so much resistance from behind. It's time to stop. Yeah, what's that sound? Everybody look, what's going down. Field day for heat. 1,000 people in the street, yeah, singing songs and carrying signs. Mostly say hurry for our side. Think it's time to stop. Yeah, what's that sound? Everybody look, what's going down. Seeing the waves. Paranoia strikes deep into your life. It will creep. Oh, it starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come to take you away. It's time to stop. Yeah, what's that sound? Everybody look, what's going down. Stop. Yeah, what's that sound? Everybody look, what's going down. Stop. Yeah, what's that sound? Everybody look, what's going down. Stop. Yeah, what's that sound? Everybody look, what's going down. Check out. Stay safe, y'all. Look after each other.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester's online Sunday morning worship service. We are glad that you've joined us virtually this morning. It's an act of love that we gather in this way during this time of pandemic response. We hope that this service gives you an opportunity to pause for a few minutes, to gather in community so that we might care for each other, take a moment to reflect on our own well-being, and discover opportunities for spiritual refreshment, even as we are at a personal distance. We will gather this way at least through the fall. Through the next few weeks, our religious exploration program will be offering opportunities for children and youth to gather virtually as well. Please visit www.uucworcester.org for more information on these get-togethers, as well as other opportunities to meet for discussion and support. For safety purposes, and so that we might come to know you better, as you are able, please list your name on your video feed. Please note that this service is being live streamed over Facebook and is being recorded and will be available on the church YouTube channel and the service archive on our website in the coming days. Following the service this morning, you're invited to remain on this Zoom channel and join us for virtual fellowship hour. Once again, welcome. Our opening words are by Amanda Schubert. In honor of risk takers, those that hold the vision with clarity and charge forward with optimism, even in the face of others' doubts. You are our lamplighters and our guides. May we never forget the courage it takes to lead the way forward. In honor of cautious skeptics, those who gather the information needed to navigate the tumultuous waters of change. You are the map makers and the preparers of the stores. May we appreciate your attention to the details that keep us on course. In honor of the doubters, those that may fear the changing tides of the turbulent world, you are our anchors and remind us of where we have been and where we are as a community now. May we relish your commitment to our history and your passion for who we have become. In honor of the dreamers, those that imagine what we can be to and in this world. You are the wind that blows the sails of change, pushing us ever forward. May we revel always in your whimsy and hope that dares us to never stop becoming. May the work we do together strengthen our community and our world. May we heed the call to always hold the vision of the Free Church ever in our sight and to work towards justice. Together we wield a powerful spirit that is strengthened by the gifts of all. Please join us this morning in our opening hymn, number 159 in our hymnal, This Is My Song. like to invite Robin Mitskovich forward to share with us her RE moment. Robin.
Hi, good morning, everybody. We had a wonderful candle chalice lighting yesterday afternoon at 4:30. Aaron helped lead it with us, and people did pick up their clay chalices that they made and that Jesse Trowbridge fired for us. There's still a lot of chalices left to be picked up. We can make arrangements to do that at the church. People also dropped off food for Thanksgiving food drive, and that can be dropped off today as well. There'll be a bin out front. This morning, we talked about food justice with the kids. We also cooked together over Zoom. It was quite the experience, and it was really fun. We made cheesy pizza rolls. But we read this book, Maddie's Fridge, which talked about two friends, two best friends, and one who noticed that her friend did not have enough food in the fridge, and the way that this friend tried to help her other friend with her food issue and still keep a friendship. I know a lot of us do a lot of work in the area of helping other people stay food safe, and I'd like to thank everybody that works at our Loaves and Fishes food pantry to help that happen. This afternoon at 3, the youth group and I will be walking the rail trail in West Boylston, and we're going to be spreading rocks of peace and hope along the trail. So we look forward to doing that. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Robin. These are the words of my friend George Tiger, who is a chaplain in the Army. One of our Unitarian Universalist chaplains, in fact. I sit alone planning the rest of the day. An Afghan uniformed police officer approached holding a rickety old bird cage occupied by a rickety old bird. I wasn't sure what to think as he set it in front of me. "Good," he said, and gave me a thumbs up. Not wanting to be rude, I reciprocated the gesture. "Good, nice bird." What else could I say when shown an Afghan's bird? "Is you bird?" He replied. "You keep." "No," I tried to say, "I can't keep the bird." I stood to return the bird, but he turned and walked away. There I was, flabbergasted, holding my bird in my hand, wondering what to do. In part, the bird was given in return for cigars we shared the night before, a gesture of friendship, but even more an attempt to be known across a deep cultural divide. I didn't want to be rude, but the last thing I needed was a bird, a rickety old one at that. Luckily, another Afghan uniformed police officer who spoke better English than I speak Pashto returned the bird and conveyed my thankfulness for the gesture. Our new friendship remained intact, bird or no. We share very little with the Afghans. Our cultures are stunningly different. Our concepts of human meaning and value have dissimilar foundations. Ours is the inherent value of the individual as an individual. Theirs is the meaning of the individual gains from relatedness to tribe and clan. However great our differences, this moment revealed to me an eternal truth. There is something at the core of humanity that makes us the same. We all long for connection. We all desire to be known as ourselves. This human need to be known, even across the widest rifts of culture, may be the one thing with the power to bring lasting peace to our world. We come to that time in our service when we're given an opportunity to share that which is symbolic of what we value, symbolic also of the work that we produce in the world, the way in which we gather for ourselves that which is necessary for our own surviving and thriving, but also necessary for the surviving and thriving of all that which we value. And so, as a matter of ritual, every time we come together for worship, we take up an offering. I invite you to text your offering this morning to 508-231-5335, or if you desire, visit www.uucworcester.org/donate to contribute there. At this time, our morning offering will be received. We come once again to that time in our service when we are given pause to consider what is deepest in our hearts or most profoundly on our minds or in the work of our hands in the days that have transpired or in prospect of days to come, joys and sorrows which touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because of our capacity to share them in the midst of a company that claims us as a sojourner. So I invite those of you who have joys or sorrows this day to unmute yourself and to either virtually raise your hand or to raise your hand, and we'll do a quick scan of our video feed as well to see if we're missing anyone. Are there joys or sorrows to be shared this day? Mara Pentlarge.
Hi, all. Really, things are going very well. I get to live next door to my grandson. I get to take care of him while his mom is working. My husband has decided not to move here. He's staying at the old house. He gets to decide that if that's what he wants. I think it's a lot more fun over here. But I'm trying to keep a nice positive perspective on this. Thanks all.
Thank you, Mara. Let's see. Cheryl Lachey.
Hi, yesterday, Bruce and I got to participate in his cousin's daughter's bat mitzvah via Zoom. And the very first 10 minutes of the Zoom was a cacophony of lovely Jewish voices trying to say, "Can you hear me? Who's that?" What was wonderful. It was music made of voices being very happy to see each other, some of them for the first time on Zoom. And it is wonderful to be able to still experience these things even at a distance.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Evan.
Morning, all. I share, I guess, both joys and sorrow, breathing a kind of sigh of relief after a stressful week on our national political front. But the joy is thinking about all the opportunities I've had to stay engaged in the world and stay engaged with the UUCW community. Last weekend with Claire and Kim and one of the elder Heffernan's sons, took a beautiful hike with our middle school group from RE. So still really appreciating that opportunity to connect with our young people and to see some adults as well picking up their young people. And just wanting to share some joy from the work that the Side with Love Task Force has been doing, continuing get out the vote work in so much earnestness, and our monthly conversations around anti-racism. So just also a joy to be able to come together in community, and an invitation to do so for the rest of the community as well.
Thank you so much, Evan. Let's see, Judy Savage.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I spent yesterday out in my yard raking in the sunshine and warm weather and feeling very calm and thinking back to the days when JFK was campaigning for the presidency. And one of the campaign songs was "Happy Days Are Here Again." And I put it on my phone and I listened to Barbara Streisand sing it. And I was humming it all day. I was just one happy person. So that was really, really wonderful. And the sun is out and warm again, so that helps. But I'm happy.
Thank you so much, Judy, for that. Paul Marr.
Yes, I have a sorrow. One of my friends, well, he was a customer of mine. He died last week. Bob Ferraza. He owned Spencer Food, and I remember the last time I seen it because he basically was working on his computers, and I just knew something was up with him, and he died on Friday, and so I'm remembering him.
Thank you.
It doesn't normally affect me, but for some reason it's affecting me.
Thank you so much for sharing, Paul. Eve.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to second what Evan had said. This week was one of, well, some tears, both relief and grief and joy, and just relief that this administration is coming to an end, but also that just grief over everything we've lost in the last 4 years and the work ahead of us. So for me, I felt like it popped an illusion of our country. I think that I still have the privilege to maintain and help me recommit to a really long fight, a longer fight for justice than we'll ever really know.
Thank you so much, Eve.
I have another one.
Paul, wait just a second, please. Susan Knees.
I just want to say, babies. That's all.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I just also to remember my mom who passed away in 1982 on November 5th. So
Thank you so much.
that's it. No more.
Aaron, can I share?
Sure, please.
Hi, this is Maura Rouse. I participated yesterday in a Zoom memorial service for my longtime best friend, Eleanor O'Neill's mother. Elle and I met when we were 11, and our families were very closely aligned. My brother was her sister's age, my sister was her brother's age, and Elle and I were friends and lived in each other's homes. And Sylvia O'Neill died recently after a struggle. She was 91, and it was a lovely, beautiful service conducted by the minister from Duluth. Sylvia had last lived in Madison, Wisconsin, I guess. But it was just so nice to participate, even though everybody's far apart, and staying safe. And that was my joy to be there.
Thank you so much, Maura. Are there any other spoken joys or sorrows this morning? If so, please open your microphone, Bernadette.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am overjoyed. Yay! Go Biden and Harris. I am so happy. I want to cry. Thank you so much, everybody participating and helping this come to pass. I am so happy. Onward, nation, together, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. Dave Bono.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that at these times, I see in the audience, and I know, Matt's already smiling. He thinks I'm going to be funny here, but in all seriousness, thinking about my dad, he said there's nothing smoother in the universe than a baby's fanny. And Laura Lenehan, and let's see, there's one more baby.
Eve Stutzman. Yep.
Eve Steppen.
Stutzman.
I just think there's two babies' fannies that are soft. And what a glorious thing that is. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, David. Pauline.
Hi, I just wanted to talk about the shoe boxes a little bit. We did have about 4 or 5 people sign up, but there are 57 children. And so I was wondering if other people would sign up. There's a link on our message from church. And if you press on that link, you'll get the sign up sheet. Don't try to erase anything except if it says that you can make a change, but or if you want to make a change to your own signature, because it's live. It goes from one person to the other. The drop-off dates were not listed. I don't know if they are now, but they're the 6th, the 13th, and the 20th. I'll be at church from 1 to 3. You can drop off there. Please give it a shot, because these kids have been, and the whole community at ACE have been a little bit, well, a lot scared since George Floyd. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pauline. In addition to what we have heard spoken, we have a few written joys and sorrows. Kim Napoleone writes, please continue to send blessings to my dear friend Brian, who suffered a massive stroke. He is now in long-term healthcare facility in Florida. Also, let's see here. Also, I have Laura Lenehan is remembering a child that was struck by a car and died this week, and the efforts that were put into trying to save him on site. And so I'm so hoping that, well, I guess may have been, it may have been an animal actually that was hurt, and lots of care went into trying to save the one that was hit. Congratulations to Kim Napoleone on her birthday today. So pleased to hear that. Melissa McKean, deeply grateful for results of the election and the prospect of more peaceful world. Kim writes, taking joy in taking walks with my family 3 days this week. Let's see. Rachel and Brian Keogh talking about how wonderful our community is. So, so many different things. The other one that I want to add to today is gratitude from me and from everyone in this congregation to our Get Out the Vote team, to Beth Posner Waldron, Ruth Silver, and so many others that put their lifeblood into efforts to make certain that all voices were heard during this election, and who invited many of us to journey with them and to use our power to bring about more justice and more access to voting for everyone in the country. This was indeed a ministry of justice and a ministry of hope. And I'm so very grateful that they came forward earlier this year and said, this is something we want to do, and that they had a congregation that would support and honor that work and participate with them in it. I know that others in the community, I'm thinking here of Lynn Gustia and David Williams and Carol Howe and so many others who we had, Sherry Lynn and others who we had pictures of them writing thousands of postcards and making phone calls and being involved in rallies and in workshops and in webinars. Lots and lots of effort that went on in this. And so our profound gratitude to you this morning for all that you've done. Let us be in the spirit of prayer and meditation. O Holy One, we come together in this moment with gratitude in our hearts for work well done, with sighs of relief, with questions about the future, and a sense of possibility. And we recognize that not all celebrate this moment. Many bring grave concern to it. And we honor that as well. Help us be mindful this day of the privilege of our democracy, which allows our voices to be heard, and that we have a responsibility to carry that work into a bruised and hurting world. Even as we take a deep breath or a sigh, or simply a moment to be outside of the cacophony of voices and argumentation and ads and so many other things that have occupied our time in the last few months. Help us be mindful of the work that is ongoing. And we are grateful this day for birthdays and anniversaries, for the presence of infants that remind us of our responsibility to generations to come. We send healing thoughts to those who continue to strive to recover this day. We honor friends facing health crises. We remember Deb Van Battenberg this morning, who was operated on for hip surgery this week and who remains in the hospital. We remember so many others who strive to work through the complications of the dis-ease that plagues us in this moment, and those whose livelihoods and whose energies are bound with the course of that disease. Help us remember that we are one community, one nation, and one world, and that our surviving and thriving depends on the surviving and thriving of all. This day we honor especially our veterans, those whose service and sacrifice have helped us realize peace in many places in our history. May they find home in our communities and in our nation and in our world. And may the memory of warfare seed as the memory of possible life regain its focus. for all of that which is true, right, real, and good this day. We give great thanks. Amen. And blessed be.
Amen.
My friend George Tiger, whose words we heard a few moments ago, who's a UU Army chaplain for some 18 years now, writes, "One of the things that I miss most about home is having a comfortable place to sit. It isn't something most people think about, but over time it becomes more and more important. Cushioned seats make a big difference. As I travel around, rarely do I find such a soft place to sit. Soldiers do their best they can with what they have. However, you can only do so much with plywood and 2x4s. Most of the discomforts of deployment are small, like plywood seats, but month after month they add up. It's easy to pray for things to be better, or different, or just easier. In my experience, these prayers are rarely answered. I don't think prayer works that way. The power of prayer does not lie in its ability to change the world we live in as much as it has the potential to change we who live in the world. Too often, wishing or praying for things to be different leads only to frustration and a downward spiral of negative thoughts and emotions. There are some things that will not change. Confronted with these hard realities, it is better to seek courage to face them than hope in vain for a miracle. This courage to endure is more difficult to find than the courage required for a one-time act of heroism. This everyday courage to drive on day in and day out requires more than overcoming fear. It requires us to overcome ourselves. Maybe you never imagined yourself as courageous. Maybe you see your work as mundane. You are not out kicking down doors, grabbing up bad guys, or stopping the next spectacular attack. Even on a combat deployment, very few of us here are doing any of those things. But that does not mean that what you do does not require a great kind of courage. The kind of courage that gets you out of bed every morning and gives you the power to keep going late into the night. This courage may not get you a medal. It may go unnoticed. Yet perseverance, in spite of all the reasons you could find to give up, is something to be proud of. It is a kind of courage that completes the mission and brings us safely home. This courage to endure is more difficult to find than the courage required for a one-time act of heroism. This everyday courage to drive on day in and day out requires more than overcoming fear. It requires us to overcome ourselves. I've been thinking a lot about the truth of my friend's admonition over the past few days and months. More than once this week, I've heard someone say it's like the whole country is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And I understand that sentiment, even if I wonder if most people really understand what PTSD is. During this pandemic and the election season, it certainly feels to many, if not most, like we've been in a state of perpetual conflict, anxiety, depression, uncertainty, anger, and at times hopelessness. The chronic nature of these conditions is where the comparison to PTSD comes in. And to be sure, there are many who have been triggered into states of chronic stress. And yet I want to caution us that PTSD more often comes from experiences of extreme and sustained violence. And to be certain, there are many in our community, country, and world for which this condition continues to be a daily reality. Many Black and Brown communities feel and have felt for generations like they are in a state of constant siege. Many who live with the reality that systems we rely on for safety are more often than not utilized to perpetuate state-sponsored violence in service to the control of those whose lives are deemed less worthy of the freedoms that we all should cherish. This morning, it is this state of being and the hypervigilance that it preserves that energizes my reflection. Many of us drew a collective breath yesterday as we witnessed the call of the election for President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. Others gasped in grief at the projected loss of the current administration. Both are the natural human responses to the outcome. Those who have been on the losing side of an election before know something of the disappointment, the outrage, and the grief that accompanies that experience. Those who have won know something of the exhilaration that such a moment can bring. Grief and hope are both the consequences of our democratic process and any experience of victory and defeat. But they are not the only consequences. Our veterans will remind us that in many ways, the hardest work after such experiences is to return home and reestablish or salvage a life of meaning out of the experiences of extreme trial. This morning, it is this work to which I turn. So I'd have us pause for a moment in this morning and remember what it is that we are doing here on this planet, in this community in central Massachusetts, in this sacred space that is our religious home, and in the homes and lives we share with family and friends. I'm particularly mindful this morning of the sacrifices that so many of our ancestors made so that we might live and thrive in the ways of our own choosing here. The work and love of so many that bind us to a vision of a world of possibilities, possibilities that required and require the service of all of us and the sacrifices of many. In his book, The Greatest Generation, Tom Brokaw reminds us of this legacy. Walking the beaches of Normandy with a group of veterans, he experienced a life transformation. As I walked the beaches with American veterans, he writes, who had landed there and now returned for this anniversary, men in their 60s and 70s, and listened to their stories in cafes and inns, I was deeply moved and profoundly grateful for all they had done. I realized that they had been all around me as I was growing up and that I had failed to appreciate what they had been through and what they had accomplished. These men and women who had come of age in the Great Depression when economic despair hovered over the land like a plague. They had watched their parents lose their businesses, their farms, their jobs, their hopes. They had learned to accept a future that played out one day at a time. And then, just as there was a glimmer of economic recovery, war exploded across Europe and Asia. When Pearl Harbor made it irrefutably clear that America was not a fortress, this generation was summoned to the parade ground and told to train for war. They left their ranches in Sully County, South Dakota, their jobs on the main street of Amicus, Georgia. They gave up their place on the assembly lines in Detroit and the ranks of Wall Street. They quit school and went from cap and gown directly into uniform. They answered the call to help save the world from the two most powerful, ruthless military machines ever assembled, instruments of conquest in the hands of fascist maniacs. This morning, this generation is very much in my heart, as are the generations that followed them into the wars in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. I'm particularly mindful of the fact that my children's generation has grown up in an era of perpetual warfare, a generation that does not know the experience of a nation at peace. There are many to remember this day as we honor the service of ancestors and friends this weekend. This annual day of honor ought also give us pause to consider how it is that we will live out the legacy of their service, sacrifice, and sense of purpose. Which brings me to the title of this reflection, In the Service to Sacrifice. It would be easy in this moment for me to turn to a lengthy discussion about the theology of sacrifice and service to state-sponsored religion. Instead, I simply want to state that I believe that we are the heirs of a fundamental pathology, which historians and sociologists of religion might well name as a fundamental to the historic narrative of humankind. Simply stated, we live in a world that has far too often solved its problems by casting blame on the other, and then sought to bring about a feeling of unity by annihilating that other in service to a dominating vision of who we are. The French historian and literary critic René Girard once famously penned, "All religious rituals spring from a surrogate victim, and all the great institutions of humankind, both secular and religious, spring from this ritual. It could hardly be otherwise, for the working basis of human thought, the process of civilization, is rooted in the surrogate victim." Or as one scholar put it, as a counter force to the general pattern of religion, René Girard went on to argue in later studies the prophetic tradition in Israel, culminating in the story of Jesus of Nazareth, gradually disclosed these secrets hidden in the foundation of the world. This revelation, however, was more than its recipients could bear, and so they soon buried it again under the sacrificial reading that interpreted Jesus' death not as an unmasking and exploding of the victimization mechanism, but as itself the ultimate satisfaction and confirmation of exigency. Plainly put, we got it wrong. We got it wrong about the meaning of sacrifice and have willfully maintained our common ignorance about it. On the one hand, we experience sacrifice as a vehicle through which we give up our own lives in service to the life of those we love and the generations that are to come. Every parent knows the essence of this ideal. How many of us would be willing to put our lives on the line for our families? And there are those who do and have done the same for our communities, country, and world. This morning, I'm particularly mindful of those who have been placed or who placed themselves on the front line of the responses to pandemic, which plagues us all. And I'm equally mindful of those whose service to our country required the ultimate sacrifice. This is the sacrifice of service. The dominant form of sacrifice, however, often goes unnamed and unrecognized as such, one whose logic is a bit more twisted. This form of sacrifice requires that a community or country consign itself to the reality that certain people must suffer and die in order for the community or country to ultimately survive and prosper. This is the sacrifice of sophisticated resignation. In short, it is also the logic of unmitigated pandemic spread in service to herd immunity. But it's also the logic of ghettoization, systemic racism, reproductive oppression, sexism, xenophobia, isolationism, and nationalism. Instead of acts of heroism exposing the illegitimacy of and horrors of violence as a means of solving human problems, we have perpetuated a culture of violence in service to the maintenance of control by those whose power is threatened by the vision of a common good and beloved community. And the question before us this morning is whether we're willing to take this moment in our history as a nation to truly confront the forces which perpetuate this ultimate lie of our common humanity. Can we as a nation turn from the forces of division, scapegoating, and perpetual warfare and hew from the mountains of our common despair a mountain of hope, which is to say, now the harder work begins. As we move forward over the next few days and months, might this vision of hope and the unrealized potential of the sacrifices of so many in service to our common humanity energize us for the work that is ours to do in the country we claim and the world that is our home and home to all who inhabit it. Let us foster the courage to care, to make this vision a reality, and in this concept of courage with which I close, and it is this concept of courage which I close with the words of my friend George Tiger again. He writes, the earliest human creation myths include references to the need for human companionship. In Genesis, we read, then the Lord said, it is not good that man should be alone. And from our earliest beginnings, humanity has recognized that we need one another. There's a kind of courage we often forget and don't give ourselves credit for. I call it the courage to care. It takes a certain kind of strength to overcome the fear we might face on a dismounted patrol or confirming an IED, but for many, these fears are things we just put out of our minds. As I drive around Kandahar City, I rarely give a thought to an IED threat, or at least, or the latest report of one. These things just fade into the background. Living in a combat zone, knowing the real danger we all face and caring about and for others takes real courage. We live and work with each other 24/7. We get close to each other. We hear about each other's kids, wives, husbands, and friends, all with the specter of the next IED or spectacular attack looming over us. After losing a friend this deployment, I've wondered if it was worth the risk, the work, and the pain to get to know anyone else. Would it be easier to just scrape the surface and not get so close that I would be forced to care for someone again? I'm not alone in these feelings. But the cost of not caring is far higher than the pain of grief and loss. When we cut ourselves off from others out of fear, we forfeit our humanity to that fear. This is the essence of real courage, the willingness to risk loss in order to achieve a greater good. We discover our full humanity by being related, connected to others. Without real relationship and meaningful connection, we cannot become our true selves. When we avoid connection in an attempt to avoid the pain of loss, what are we really giving up? Caring demands an investment of our time, energy, and emotions. Ultimately, caring is a dangerous proposition. Your caring may not be returned. Your willingness to risk may not be understood. Others who fear being hurt may seek to avoid connection and reject your efforts. Someone you have grown to care for may die. When you choose to care, you tell the world that despite all these risks, there is some truth larger than ourselves that makes every loss, every grief, and every disappointment worth the risk. I can't explain how or why this happens, but I've experienced this truth beyond hows and whys. When things just don't seem to make sense, our caring gives us meaning to our lives. Sometimes when nothing makes sense, all we can do is care, and that very act brings us meaning. So it is that the courage to care may be the greatest courage we can display. Beloved, this time of exhilaration, this time of anticipation, this time of taking a deep breath, may we not forget the courage to care, not only for those who have agreed with us, but for all. And may we find in those relationships a common humanity that transcends our differences, so that we as a country and we as a world may truly begin to heal. Amen. And blessed be.
Amen.
Our litany this day, and I apologize that this may be blurry for some of you, your response to each of the things that I will read is one line, and that is, no one is outside the circle of love. I begin with these words by Susan Frederick Gray, the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and Reverend Erica Hewitt, who is a leader in our movement related to our worship resources. We know that hurt moves through the world, perpetuated by action, inaction, and indifference. Our values call us to live in the reality of that heartbreak of our world, remembering that no one is outside the circle of love. We who are Unitarian Universalists not only affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, we also affirm the inherent wholeness of every being, despite apparent brokenness. No one is outside the circle of our love. We know that things break or break down, promises, friendship, sobriety, hope, communication. This breaking happens because our human hearts and our very institutions are frail and imperfect. We make mistakes. Life is messy. No one is outside the circle of our love. With compassion as our guide, we seek the well-being of all people. We seek to dismantle systems of oppression that undermine our collective humanity. We believe that we are here to guide one another toward love. No one is outside the circle of love. No matter how fractured we are or once were, we can make whole people of ourselves. We are whole at our core because of the great, unnameable, sometimes inconceivable love in which we live. No one is outside the circle of love. Please join us for our closing hymn, For the Earth Forever Turning. Our closing words this morning are by Heather Ryan Starr, my colleague and our sister congregation in Hartford, Connecticut. May whatever gatherings or activities we engage in this Sunday afternoon help restore us, our connections to one another, our sense of hope, beauty, and fun in this world, our deep knowing that we have to take care of ourselves and each other with joy and joy, with love and joy, if we are to soulfully survive the world's mayhem. Amen. And blessed be.
Amen.
Once again, beloved, worship in this place has come to an end, but our service continues. Next, with an opportunity for sharing and reflection, may yours be a wondrous and wonderful week. May you find time to rest and heal. May you engage in meaningful activities that help you remember your purpose and place in the world. And may you give something of yourself to those that you love and the world that you serve. Amen. And blessed be.